Why indifference makes you unstoppable. Marcus Aurelius' hidden secret. There's a strange paradox buried deep inside human psychology. We are creatures built for survival, wired to care, to strive, to fear. Yet every time we care too much, strive too desperately, or fear too deeply, we weaken. We become brittle, anxious, reactive. And here's the twist. The very thing we're told makes us human, this constant emotional investment in everything, can also be the thing that destroys us from the inside. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and philosopher king, saw through this long before modern psychology caught up. And his answer wasn't what you might expect. It wasn't hypermasculine detachment. It wasn't coldness. It wasn't apathy. It was something far more dangerous. Indifference, not out of ignorance, but out of understanding. And that kind of indifference, Marcus discovered, can make you unstoppable. Let me explain. Most people misunderstand indifference, but they think it means not caring at all, becoming robotic, detached, inhuman. But for Marcus, indifference wasn't about feeling nothing. It was about being strategic with what you let affect you. It was about recognizing that most of what you react to, criticism, praise, fear, loss, failure, is outside your control. And once you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, you unlock a new kind of power. And the world no longer whips you around. You stop being a puppet. You start being a master.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Now picture this. You wake up and you check your phone. Notifications, emails, opinions, news, fear, pressure, expectations. You haven't even gotten out of bed and already the world is trying to hijack your attention, your peace, your energy. And we let it every single day. But Marcus Aurelius would tell you, you have power over your mind, not outside events. But realize this, and you will find strength. He knew the secret that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. You are not obligated to respond to everything. Indifference doesn't mean you don't care. It means you become wise enough to choose what to care about. Now here's the part most people never see coming. Indifference is not weakness, it's clarity. Weakness is when your emotions are dictated by the moods of others, by the circumstances you can't change. Clarity is when you see through the noise and ask, does this actually deserve my energy? You start to measure the world not by how loud it is, but by how aligned it is with your purpose. You're no longer addicted to being right. You're no longer triggered by judgment. You stop needing applause. You stop fearing rejection. Because the truth is, those things only have power over people who are still trapped in the illusion that validation equals worth. Marcus wasn't some removed monk in a cave. He was a leader of an empire. He made decisions that determined the lives and deaths of thousands. He faced betrayal, war, plague, the death of children, and still, every night, he returned to his journal, his meditations, to remind himself, only the inner citadel is yours. The world can break your body, but it cannot touch your soul without your permission. That's where indifference becomes weaponized, not as retreat, but as armor. Not as emotional dullness, but as unshakable focus. So ask yourself something no one probably ever asked you growing up. What would your life look like if you stopped reacting to every opinion, every fear, every expectation thrown your way? How much lighter would you feel if you didn't take things personally? What if you could face rejection and not lose a shred of your dignity? What if failure didn't rattle you but refined you? That is the quiet, brutal power of indifference. But let's be honest, we cling to reaction because it makes us feel alive. Drama is addictive. It gives us a story to live inside. Victim, hero, underdog. But indifference strips the story. It asks you to drop the role, need to see clearly. And that's scary, because when you become indifferent to praise, you also become indifferent to blame. When you stop chasing validation, you also stop fearing invisibility. But this is the fire Marcus Aurelius walked through. He stopped playing the game. And when you stop playing, you win not by defeating others, but by no longer needing the trophy. So here's the start of the path you must ask yourself daily: do I control this, or does it control me? And if you don't control it, why give it your peace? Marcus knew this wasn't easy. He struggled, too. But his lesson was clear. The person who learns to master indifference becomes immune not to pain, but to manipulation. You become untouchable where it matters most. Emotional immunity, how stoic indifference builds unbreakable mental armor. So now we've stepped into the territory where Marcus Aurelius becomes dangerous not to others, but to your old self, the reactive self, the anxious self, the self that jumps every time the world pokes it. And here's where things get interesting. Indifference, as Marcus understood it, doesn't make you numb, it makes you immune. Not invulnerable in a childish way, like nothing ever hurts, but immune in a mature, unshakable way where you no longer crumble under the weight of life's chaos, because you've trained your mind to become your fortress. And this is where most people fall off. They think, but emotions are human, right? Aren't we supposed to feel? Of course, feeling is not the enemy, but being enslaved by every emotion that rushes in, that's the problem. Marcus never said don't feel anger, sadness, or fear. He said, observe them. Don't let them steer the ship. Emotions can scream. That doesn't mean you give them the wheel. Indifference, in this sense, is the ability to notice everything without obeying anything. That's the core of emotional immunity. Imagine this: someone insults you, directly, publicly, in front of people you respect. Now, what does your mind do? It leaps to defend itself, to restore image, to prove worth, to correct the narrative. But Marcus would pause right there and ask, why? Does that insult define you? Did your virtue suddenly vanish because of someone else's tongue? Well, of course not. It's only your attachment to ego that flares up. And once you become indifferent to ego, insults lose their teeth. You stop being reactive. You start being deliberate. But here's the real kicker. Emotional immunity isn't about isolation. It's not about becoming cold or unreachable. It's about becoming so secure within yourself that nothing external can drag you out of your frame. Think about how much energy you waste every day reacting to things that don't matter a week later. A stranger's opinion, a passive-aggressive message, a missed opportunity. That's emotional leakage. You bleed mental focus every time you surrender control to a temporary emotion. Indifference patches that leak. It doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care intelligently. You redirect that energy inward into focus, into purpose, into action. Marcus Aurelius wasn't meditating on a mountaintop. He was ruling an empire, facing war, burying children. He had every reason to fall apart. But he turned inward, wrote in his journal, and reminded himself that external events cannot touch the inner citadel unless you invite them in. So here's a question that should haunt you in a good way. Who or what are you giving permission to rule your peace right now? Is it your boss? Your partner? A toxic friend? A comment online? A future fear? Because if so, you've just crowned them king of your internal world. You've handed them your throne. Marcus reminds us you don't need to do that. You can feel the turbulence without being thrown off course. Indifference doesn't mean you won't experience pain. It means pain no longer becomes your identity. It becomes a visitor, not a resident. This is emotional armor forged not from steel, but from self-understanding. Once you understand what's truly yours to carry and what isn't, you become lighter, stronger, quieter, immune to manipulation, because people can only manipulate what you want from them. If you don't need their validation, if you don't fear their rejection, you're free. And freedom is the final goal of indifference, not avoidance, not detachment from life, but a deep engagement with life that isn't ruled by fear or approval. Marcus Aurelius lived in a storm, and he became the calm eye of it. That's not luck. That's training. That's philosophy weaponized into practice. So now ask yourself, what would your life feel like if your peace was no longer negotiable? What would change if no event, no person, no headline could hijack your clarity? That's not a fantasy. That's the life Marcus was building, one thought at a time, one breath at a time, one refusal to react at a time. The art of letting go, why indifference is the gateway to total freedom. There is a moment in every serious life, usually quiet, usually unexpected, when you realize that holding on is hurting you more than letting go. Not in some vague, motivational way, but in the stark, practical, philosophical truth Marcus Aurelius came to understand. Freedom is not gained by control. It is gained by indifference, not apathy, not disengagement, but the calm, steady refusal to let what you can't control own you. This is the true art of letting go, not turning away from life, but seeing it clearly enough to stop clutching everything like it's yours to keep. So much of what enslaves us, if we're honest, is rooted in attachment. Attachment to outcomes, to reputation, to approval, to revenge, to control. The irony is that we think these attachments make us safer, more powerful, more successful. But they do the opposite. They make us anxious, rigid, vulnerable to collapse. Because the more tightly you grip something, your image, your future, your role in someone else's life, the more fragile you become when the universe, inevitably, reminds you that it was never yours to begin with. Marcus didn't philosophize about this from a distance. He wrote about it in blood. As emperor, he buried children. He faced mutiny. He watched plagues tear through his empire. And yet, in Meditations, he writes again and again about releasing control not as defeat, but as liberation. If you are distressed by anything external, he says, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. Now pause. Think about that. This you have the power to revoke. That's the doorway Marcus points to, one that 99% of people walk past without noticing. Most people think power means holding on tighter. But Marcus flips it. True power is the ability to let go of needing things to go your way. The ability to say, I did what I could, the rest isn't mine, and to mean it, to embody it, to not just say it when it's convenient, but to live it when it costs you something. So why don't more of us do this? Why don't we let go? Because we believe that if we let go, we'll lose. That without control, without gripping tight, everything will collapse. But Marcus teaches something more courageous. Letting go is not passive. It is the most active form of courage, because it means facing reality without illusion. It means saying, I accept that this person may never understand me, and I'll stop chasing it. I accept that I might fail, and I will still try. I accept that this chapter is closing, and I won't resist it anymore. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop clinging. You stop needing every moment to affirm your worth. You stop expecting the world to mirror back your plans. And instead, you meet life as it is, wild, unpredictable, untamable. But you move with it, not against it. And ironically, it's this very surrender that brings the strength most people spend their whole lives chasing. So here's the deep, uncomfortable question that unlocks the next level of your power. What are you holding on to, not because it's right, but because you're afraid of who you'll be without it? A relationship, a belief, a story you tell yourself about your value? Because the moment you face that honesty, not with shame, but with clarity, you begin to reclaim your mind. Indifference is the scalpel. It cuts away the excess, the noise, the drama. It doesn't make life easy, but it makes you free. And freedom is the condition from which your truest self emerges, not the person everyone expects, but the one you become when you no longer owe your peace to anyone or anything. Marcus Aurelius wasn't cold. He was precise. His indifference wasn't cruelty, it was compassion for the soul. His refusal to be ruled by external things wasn't detachment, it was alignment. Alignment with nature, with impermanence, with truth. He understood that life, by design, demands we let go. And those who learn to do it willingly don't fall behind, they rise above. Unbothered, unbroken, how indifference turns you into a force of nature. When you think of true power, what comes to mind? For most, it's something loud. A display of dominance, wealth, influence, maybe even intimidation. But Marcus Aurelius would disagree. To him, true power is silent. It's the person who cannot be shaken, the one who moves through storms untouched by praise or blame, the one who doesn't need to dominate others because they've already mastered themselves. That's the end game of indifference, not to be above life, but to be in it, unbothered and unbroken, like a mountain that watches the weather change but never moves. Indifference doesn't mean nothing touches you. It means nothing owns you. It means that someone can disrespect you and you don't feel the need to retaliate. That you can fail in public and not let shame rewrite your worth. That you can be passed over, misjudged, attacked, and still walk forward with the same calm mind and clear focus. But why? Because you know something deeper. You are not here to please, to win, or to impress. You are here to live aligned with reason, with nature, and with truth. Most people live in a mental prison, constantly dancing for validation, running from judgment, fearing loss. They live not from within, but in reaction to everything outside of them. But Marcus Aurelius teaches us that when we become indifferent to the world's approval and indifferent to its condemnation, we step outside the prison. We no longer dance for others, we move on our own rhythm. And in doing so, we become dangerous, not to others, but to everything that once held us back. Because let's be honest, so many of us know what we need to do. The next step is obvious. The change is overdue. But we don't act. Why? Because we care too much about what people will think, about whether it'll work, about whether we'll look foolish. That's the real prison. Why? The fear of perception. But what if you stopped caring not because you're numb, but because you're clear? What if you stopped giving energy to noise and instead listened to the quiet voice inside you that already knows? That's when indifference turns you into a force of nature. Because now you no longer operate from fear. You act from principle. You speak from truth. You move from stillness. You don't argue with fools because your time is too sacred. You don't cling to status because you know who you are. You don't seek revenge because you understand karma is already built into the structure of reality. You're not passive, you're just precise. And that precision cuts through life like a blade through fog. So how do you become this version of yourself? Not overnight, not with affirmations or bravado, but with discipline. The discipline to pause when triggered, and to breathe before reacting, to journal before spiraling, to question your thoughts before believing them, and to remind yourself again and again you control your mind or it controls you. Every day, Marcus reminded himself that he would meet liars, cowards, hypocrites, and yet none of them could rob him of his peace unless he allowed it. That is the discipline. That is the battle. Not against the world, but against the part of you that wants to cling, to control, to react. Indifference is how you win, not by domination, but by release. So here's the final question. I'll leave you with the one Marcus lived by, and the one that can change everything. What would your life look like if nothing external could disturb your internal world? Because when you reach that point when your calm can't be stolen, your focus can't be broken, and your actions are rooted in wisdom, not reaction, you stop being just another person. You become a presence. You become unshakable. You become unstoppable.